Well, I think I have a bit of some updated thoughts on the ongoing civil unrest and culture war in America. I took yesterday off because I had a lot of things to do and I just didn't have time to record anything. But that gave me some extra time to reflect on multiple stories that happened yesterday, and to try and incorporate that into my my constantly evolving view of what's going on. And so the two stories that really stuck out to me was that shooting in Louisville, where someone apparently opened fire on the crowd at the park there in Jefferson Square, where I guess all the BLM people are congregating, and the story of how the U.S. House of Representatives has passed a bill making the District of Columbia, the capital zone, the 51st state. And I have to say, I look at both of these stories and I see things that are positive for the left. I think both of these stories play well for the left. And I think overall the left is doing quite well in this latest, I guess, phase of the culture war that's been going on for many years in the United States. This new, more active and more violent era, I think, is where they're really starting to shine. They're taking bolder moves, not only in terms of the activist base, but also from the perspective of the politicians who, generally speaking, like the Republican politicians, are feckless and reactionary. But in this case of trying to make D.C. the 51st state, while symbolic and something that is not going to happen really ever, it's a pretty bold move. It's something that Republicans would never do. Not that the Republicans would want D.C. to be the 51st state, but let's say trying to expel some blue state from the Union, or trying to add in some other country or territory and make them a state, purely for political advantage. I mean, the only reason why D.C. would need to be a state is so that the Dems have 2 free Senate seats. Therefore, making the Senate, that much more of a lock for the Dems. And obviously, Republicans and everyone else are going to call the Dems out for this and say that it's just, a pretty blatant ploy, which it is. It's not something that is that totally falls on deaf ears, though, with all this stuff that's been going on in D.C., the conflict between the mayor and the president, and the way that the mayor of D.C. has turned into a hashtag resistance superstar. I mean, she painted Black Lives Matter on the streets and renamed a street Black Lives Matter Plaza. So she's really shown how D.C. is a Democratic stronghold. She's being very assertive. And assertive is a word that I really can't use to describe any Republican politician in this country. And so how does the Democratic leadership reward this bold and assertive action by the mayor of D.C.? Well, they try and elevate her to being a governor and turn her city into a state. Now, I guess obligatory, I should go through why, it's a dumb idea for D.C. to be a state in the first place. D.C. Was created because they didn't want to have the capital of the federal government to be in any one state, because that would seem to, give an advantage to that state if they were home to the capital city. If the mayor of that, of the capital city was essentially subservient to the governor of one of the several states of the Union, then that would, present a clear conflict of interest. So they cut off D.C. from, I believe, Virginia, Maryland, and maybe one other state, as just a little strip of territory to where the federal government would have supreme control, and Congress would be the one to make the laws there. And so Congress created a municipal government for the D.C., and that's why there's a mayor of D.C. So if anything, if you don't like D.C. being its own territory like that, that is governed independently and differently from the states, well, then it would just revert to being back to part of those 3 states. But nobody cares about that right now. Nobody cares about history. People are destroying history right now. It doesn't matter what D.C. means, why it exists. All that matters is, hey, there's this territory here that votes Democrat very reliably. Why don't we just make it a state so we get 2 free Senate seats? And so what this shows is that within our political class, they're losing reverence for our institutions. They don't really care about the structure of our government so much, in the way that that so many establishment politicians, long claimed to. Even though they would shred the Constitution whenever it suited them, they were very happy to use it and to claim at all times that they are just following the footsteps of their predecessors, and they love the traditions of our institutions of Congress and all this. Any of these process over principle people, which is a dumb phrase, by the way, but I won't get into that. Any of those folks would very clearly be against making D.C. a state. But yet the House voted for it quite easily. And why is that? Because nobody cares about the process anymore. Nobody cares about U.S. institutions. And so therefore, what really drives them is winning. And if they don't care about the institutions of the United States, well, then if these institutions, inhibit them from being, politically successful, if it inhibits them from achieving their aspirations, well, then they're very happy to throw these institutions aside. And so this would support my thesis from the last couple of years that, there really is no center in America, in that there's no consensus that America should exist. People are pursuing their own interests, and as soon as our government structure no longer suits those interests, people will be very happy to throw it aside. As soon as we're pushed a little bit, America will crumble, and that's what we're witnessing in this vote to make D.C. the 51st state. The left is showing that they don't care, that they will, destroy the basic, foundations of this country in the interest of short-term political gain. This is a positive thing in my mind. I guess the only negative thing is that I don't think that the GOP is nearly as on board with this yet. I think that the GOP has much more of those process-favoring people. But the fact of the matter is that our political system has become so incredibly centralized and broken that it cannot effectively govern the 320 some odd million people who live in the United States. And so therefore these institutions do need to be dismantled and reconstructed. There needs to be essentially a Soviet-style breakup of our federal government. There needs to be sort of a renegotiated settlement, a new arrangement that better suits the very different peoples of this country. But, like always when it comes to political change, even though this one is in a very basic sense positive, the left is way ahead of the right, and that's dangerous because we don't want the left essentially to be the ones pushing for the inevitable collapse of the United States, and then having an outsized influence over what the new order looks like. Because remember where we stand. The United States is bankrupt. Its people are experiencing massive unemployment. And everything's being paid for with printed money. That's not a sustainable model, no matter what you say. And so when that comes apart, there either has to be a consensus to rebuild what was just destroyed, rebuild another, union of 50 states with, similar powers and whatnot, restore the government that was there before to create, essentially create a new one that is more of the same. And if that consensus doesn't exist, which it certainly does not exist, that's what we're witnessing right now in Washington and across the country, the lack of any consensus. There will be a new order that will replace that. And you don't want the left to have essentially a monopoly on the conversation. The right needs to be thinking about what sort of a better order would suit their needs. They need to think like the left does about how to rebuild the United States of America in their own image, because there needs to be some sort of a competing view when folks finally start coming to blows. So I guess I won't talk about the shooting in the park in Louisville today. I don't really think that it ties in well to this, and I think that this whole discussion, is well enough left alone. Just talking about the actions that the House has taken in trying to symbolically declare that D.C. is going to be the 51st state. So with that said, if you gained anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe because I do upload every day and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.